Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. This week we have on Sam Trapkin. You might know him from SOS, Diamond, or Trapkin Rice. All amazing bands. I love SOS. The EP they put out was amazing. I still hope one day I'll be able to catch it live. I think that'd be really awesome to see those guys come together and play a live set. It'd just be super sick to see live. I miss Diamond so much. I still listen to Don't Lose Your Cool. That record front to back is perfect. I was really bummed when I just kind of realized, like, hey, Diamond hasn't done anything for a while. They just kind of slowly faded away. And obviously music moves so fast. People just tend to forget and they just move on because there's new music coming out left and right. So when I kind of realized, oh shit, Diamond hasn't put out a record since 2015, they're basically done. There's no way they're just gonna randomly pop up 5 years later and try to be a band again. So when I thought about that and realized that they just kind of quietly faded away, it was just a bummer because I had a lot of high hopes for that band. They went on that tour with Super Heaven and Roswell Kid, and I thought that tour was just perfect for them, and I just wish I could have seen them more. And Trapped Under Ice, legendary band. Shout out Baltimore, DC. I love everything they've ever put out, but I think my favorite record is Secrets of the World. Just the timing, it came out in 2009. It was just like a really important time in my life. I had the idea that's when like the idea spawned for me to finally move away from home, and that was just like just such a big deal for me because I moved away and I never went back. And it's just crazy to think about that period in my life. And I just think that record's just really important to me. It's my favorite record that they put out. And it's just seriously amazing front to back. I just love everything about it. The wordplay, just the guitars, everything. It's such a sick record. But shout out to Big Kiss Goodnight. Shout out to Heat Wave. All amazing stuff. I think that band can do no wrong. So I fully support them. And I'm looking forward to new music. And I seriously had a great time talking to Sam. Awesome guy, and I really hope you guys enjoy this podcast as much as I did. So please, without further ado, welcome Sam Trapkin to the podcast. All right, and we're live. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate you coming on. I'm sure like a lot of people are going to be stoked to hear from you. You've played in a lot of awesome bands over the years. But where I want to start is you were in a super band called SOS back in the day. And I was just curious, can you talk about how that band came together and why you guys like basically never did anything with it besides put out that EP?
Let's see how it came together. I remember on our first US tour we did with Terror in 2008, I think Scott from Terror had been talking to BD from Hatebreed about doing a super band, or not, I guess he wasn't calling it a super band, but about doing something with him and some other people. I think Matt from, that was an AF, and Madball was also kind of in the mix on that. And I don't know how, but I somehow, got roped into it as well, like, which was just insane for me at the time, because I was 23, and all my favorite bands. I mean, Hatebreed was literally, and still is basically my favorite hardcore band ever. And I mean, Matt Henderson's legendary. And anyways, yeah. So it kind of just, I think Nick from Terror and Matt had actually gotten together and jammed a few times. And over the years after that tour, it kind of just materialized. And you have to think that it's people though, and Terror, Hatebreed, two of the most busy touring bands ever. So I think that's why nothing ever happened. I think we all wanted to play a fest or something like that, but it was a long shot for everybody involved.
Yeah, I was definitely bummed. 'Cause I remember the EP came out, and I missed out on buying a shirt, and I was like, you know what, I'll just be able to get one whenever I see them live. And I kind of like waited, and I kind of realized, well, you know what, it's probably never gonna happen. So I was like, you know what, I'll just be happy jamming the EP from time to time.
Yeah, I love that EP. I still kind of like will listen back every year or so and be like, man, those songs are cool. And that was just an awesome memory for me. Like, we did it at the same studio in Queens that TUI did 2 records, and like Hoya from Madball stopped by and was hanging out. Like it was quite the group of people to be in the same room, and also just recording with people like Beatty and Matt Henderson, who have played on some of my favorite hardcore records, is pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't even imagine being in a room with those guys, especially like finally, like, you know, like you like playing in a band, and you know, you kind of got to this point where like, wow, now you're actually recording with these guys and like these legendary bands. I can't imagine like what that felt like.
Yeah, man, unreal. And it's cool because just like you know what it's like to be in the studio with your own band, and that's kind of your experience. And just seeing someone from a totally different, I mean, you know, Matt had been recording records probably since the late 80s, you know, hardcore records, and just the way that he went about recording, like he stood up the whole time, which is, I always sat down when I recorded, and he just stood up and he didn't want to punch in takes, you know, like he wanted to do the song straight through, because I think when he was recording a lot, you couldn't really do that easily yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think same with Beatty, like Beatty wanted to stand up the whole time. And I always just, you know, sit down when I record, and I'll punch as many times as I want. I don't care. Like it doesn't matter to me. There's no like, you know, purity aspect for me on that. So yeah, it was just cool seeing how they did it. And I think like Matt even like counted into one of the songs using his strings, which he does on a Madball song. And it's just like stuff that I would never think to do or know to do on a recording. It was really cool.
Hell yeah. Well, maybe at some point, I don't like, you know, haven't closed the door completely on seeing SOS live. I still, you know, hope because people are still around, and you know, things could happen. I feel like it could be one of those bands where, all right, like let's pull this band out and get kids excited. So there's still like hope.
I think you're the only one that hasn't closed the door on that possibility, but I appreciate that.
All right. Another band that I want to talk about is Diamond, and I know you guys had to change your name to Diamond Youth, but like seriously, one of my favorite bands. Like when I first heard you guys, I was like, oh, this is like really cool, and I didn't care. And I hate like, you know, when bands are sold to me as like, you know, oh, it has like members of this. Just like, no, like I don't care. Like I just want to hear the music. If I enjoy the music, that's awesome. Members, it doesn't matter to me. If I just want to, you know, listen and see if the music's good, and then we can go from there. But when I heard Diamond, I love that band. Like I feel like Don't Lose Your Cool, like that record is just perfect. Can you talk about how you ended up in a band like that?
Thanks, man. Yeah. Let's see. We started thinking about doing it pretty early on with I still doing a lot of TUI stuff, like before we did Big Kiss Goodnight, like when we were touring a lot prior to that record. And just like doing a couple records with TUI and kind of getting more into songwriting and recording. Like I always listened to all kinds of music, you know, and always really liked bands like Foo Fighters or like Weezer or Jimmy Eat World, like alternative 90s type of rock bands. And at that time, you know, there wasn't to me a lot of newer bands that sounded like that I liked. And it was kind of a similar thing to why we started TUI, or like why we did what we did, just because there wasn't really a band that sounded like that when we started. So I think it kind of came from a similar place. And yeah, so when we started, you know, Brendan obviously played drums for TUI at that point, and my friend Justin, who sings in Diamond, he was someone that I went to school with, and he was like in an indie band, and he was really the only friend I had that could sing well like that. And you know, his band is like pretty cool and kind of indie-ish and not really down with like I want to do a straight up like pop rock band, you know, like that's kind of, I think Diamond wasn't really exactly what he would have chosen style wise, but we talked him into it. And yeah, it took a long time to rev that up, because I had only ever written songs, like hardcore songs and metalcore songs and stuff. So I never written anything melodic before. And we took our time getting that started. I think we probably wrote for a year or two before we did our first demo in 2010. And yeah, and then like after that, it was kind of just like us figuring things out and really trying to write the best songs we could. And yeah, I mean, like we did all the artwork for the band, and the whole thing just kind of was a lot of fun. Like we just really put everything we had into it, and it was just a great outlet for us. So I think people may, look at that and think that it's weird that, we're in this hardcore band that was becoming more popular and touring a lot, and like, why would you do a band that sounded like that? But for us, it wasn't that weird. And I think our group of friends, it always wasn't that weird. Like people from Baltimore. I mean, if you look at like Justice now doing Angel Dust or Brennan doing Turnstile, like we always were into different types of music and thought it wasn't weird at all to make, different styles of music, and kind of just feeling the freedom to express, yourself however you want. I think that was always kind of in our, that was kind of how we were. And yeah, so I think that was something that around the time that Big Kiss Goodnight came out for TUI, like we were kind of doing both bands in parallel for the rest of the time. So kind of writing for both a lot at the same time. I think Don't Lose Your Cool we recorded the same year as Good Kiss Goodnight, 2011. So yeah, we're just writing a lot at that point, and that's pretty much all I was doing with my life. Just like I'd work during the day and just write songs at night, and we'd have tours and whatnot, but that was pretty much it.
So I feel like the sound and like from Don't Lose Your Cool and then going into Orange, there was kind of a shift, and I felt like you guys went like a little more indie. Is that the direction you guys were trying to take after Don't Lose Your Cool?
Yeah, I think like I really like Don't Lose Your Cool, and I think there's probably a little bit more of like a Jimmy Eat World kind of like poppier rock influence there, which I think as we spent more time growing into the bands, and especially with Justin, like Justin kind of came from more of a Radiohead-esque background, which, is much less about like poppy choruses and stuff like that. And I think kind of all of us spending more time together as a band, that's just the direction that felt right. It went more of like a kind of straight up rock direction, I think, with Orange, and from there on out. So I guess like indie, yeah, like interchangeable to me with kind of like that rock, more of a rock style that we started to write. And yeah, it just happened naturally. We still wanted to write good songs and have the songs be catchy and everything. But yeah, I think stylistically, just like I was listening to a lot of new music at that point. Like I didn't really have a lot of exposure to some of the bands. Like when we first started Diamond, my scope of bands I was listening to is way more limited. And I think just listening to more and Justin introducing me to more stuff and kind of writing with him, yeah, it evolved in that direction for sure.
Yeah, I was all about it. I feel like Justin's vocals were like pretty like distinct. Like anytime I heard anybody listening to your band, I knew exactly who it was, and I didn't even have to ask just because I could pick out his voice. So I definitely appreciate him on
That's
vocals.
Awesome.
You guys went on a full US with Roswell Kid and Super Heaven back in the day. Yeah, I love that lineup, and especially back then because I felt like a lot of people weren't really exposed to the band Roswell Kid, and I was like, I feel like that's like a really good mix for like kind of like an alternative style, like those three bands. So I just want to say like I was really stoked on that tour.
Yeah, me too, dude. I loved Roswell Kid. I don't know if they're still a band or not, but like their vibe and their style, I don't know what you would kind of call their style, but it's super catchy, but like, I don't know, man, they had really cool influences and they were awesome to tour with. And we obviously love Super Heaven, and we toured with them several times. Mm-hmm. Those are, I think, Super Heaven's probably the band we toured with the most and we're closest to.
So did you guys ever have like a formal like announcement of like Diamond breaking up, or do you guys just kind of just like let it kind of fade?
Yeah, we just let it kind of fade. We never broke up. We did that. So we did that full US tour with Roswell Kid and Super Heaven, and I just kind of hit a wall on that tour where I had been touring a lot at that point for several years, and I don't know, kind of hit me at once that I just didn't want to do full US tours like that anymore. And yeah, it is like, it's funny because I think we were actually doing better than ever with Diamond at that point. Like that tour went really well for us, and we had just put out a record and things were going well. Yeah, but I couldn't do the U.S. tour anymore. So yeah, we kind of just wound down at that point, and we I think we wrote a little bit more, but for whatever reason, we never really pulled it together to do another record after that.
Yeah, which was crazy because I was actually listening to the last record, Nothing Matters, and I was like, dude, this wasn't a bad record. And I feel like you guys had a lot of potential, and I never really understood why. Like it just kind of just got left alone.
It's just a lot, man. Like it's, I guess we kind of went through the whole cycle with TUI, like where we started off small and toured for years and years and years and years, and like you slowly just get a little more ground on each tour, and it's just a lot, and like going through that once and then starting over again with Diamond, it's like kind of the same thing. There's not really any shortcuts, and we did a lot of cool stuff as a band, like got to play with awesome bands. Like we played a show with just us and Jimmy Eat World in Baltimore, like stuff like that we got to do. And we were like on the radio for a second in Baltimore. Like we did all this cool stuff. And even with that, it's not like you're able to like shortcut just the, especially when you start to we were getting into our late 20s, it's a little bit different, I guess, if you are at that level and you're still spending that much time on tour. It's just like, can be exhausting. And I had just moved to LA around that time, and just like really loving being at home. Just like, I was like, man, LA is awesome. Like I just want to hike and hang out here and do my thing. And yeah, it's like just going on like a tour in the winter for a month just kind of doesn't seem super appealing anymore. So I think that was a factor too.
And I'm curious, I had no idea that you moved to LA. What brought you out to California?
It was literally on a Diamond tour where it was just a really hard tour. I forget. I think we had to have a couple people fill in because Turnstile had just started being a band, and we had like misscheduled something with Brendan's tour schedule, and we had like fill-ins at different points in the tour, and it was winter, and I just had like a meltdown on that tour pretty much, where I don't know, just like the stress of doing the band, and like I was kind of in between moving from Baltimore, and I thought I was going to move to New York. Like that was kind of my big plan. And I had been living in New York for a month or so and kind of just hadn't really settled in yet. And we played in LA at some point on that tour. And I think it was like at that point, March or something, and spring was just starting in LA. And I remember going on a hike there, and I was just like, oh, like I could literally just move here. I don't have to move to New York. This is awesome. And that's pretty much what did it. After that tour, I went on a hike with my friend and just made my mind up that was the next move. So that next summer, I think the July of that year, I just moved to LA because I was in between places, and it was the right move for me at the time. And I lived there for like 5 years. I don't live there anymore, but I lived there for 5 years, and then the Bay for almost 2 after that.
That's wild. And if you don't mind me asking, why'd you ultimately end up leaving? Because I feel like that's like a big deal to kind of move across the country. And I love California. I feel like LA is an interesting place. It's really nice in certain spots. So I was just curious, like, why'd you end up leaving?
Really just, so my wife's family is from the Bay Area.
Okay.
And I forget what I guess we just moved up there to be closer to her family for a while and try it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cool. Like we liked it, but yeah, we ended up moving. I live in Richmond, Virginia now, just because we have an 11-month-old now, and just super expensive up there. And we like wanted a house and like a yard and stuff to,
mm-hmm.
Play in with him and that sort of thing. So it was really just kind of like having more space. It's just obviously pretty hard to have that kind of setup in California unless you're balling. So yeah,
no,
I
trust
think
me,
that was the main reason.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. It's like really expensive to live in like the bigger cities, and like right now, like I live in Orange County, and it's like even like really expensive out here. So like,
yeah,
I definitely understand where you're coming from. But that's cool. How'd you decide on Richmond? Because you're originally from Baltimore.
Yeah, so I grew up like 45 minutes south of Baltimore in a place called PG County, Maryland. And Richmond has always been like, like we have Jared and TY from Richmond. Like I've been in Richmond a lot over the last several years. And we have some of our best friends down here that also just had a kid. And we like spend time with them at their house and really like the neighborhood. So it was kind of just like we're closer to family here. It's way cheaper here. We have friends here. And, the way that Baltimore is now, like I don't really have a whole lot of friends there anymore. Just people have moved out over the years. And so this actually kind of ended up being a place that made more sense. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And at any point, did you ever move to New York? Because I know you had that, in your mind back in the day.
It was just like my grandma lived in Long Island, and she like wasn't in her house anymore at that time. And there's like a month where I would like put my suitcase there, and then I'd go and like stay with friends in the city for a week at a time. And I had a freelance job I was doing there for a while, and it didn't last long. It was I think a month or two maybe.
Okay, for sure. Well, that's cool. Well, at least you've gotten all over the U.S. and found a nice place in Richmond. And anytime I've ever talked to anybody about Richmond, they always talk about how like nice it is out there. And I was like, damn, I have to get out there at some point because I've never been to Richmond.
Oh yeah, it's super pleasant, man. It's great. I mean, California was always like for me because I didn't travel when I was younger. Really, I didn't travel until I toured, and that was like always to me growing up like the coolest place in the world because every band I listened to was from California, and like I skateboarded and obviously skating, and California's a big thing. So I think that was kind of the arc for me, like where I had to move there at some point to kind of just like experience that. And I mean, the first time that I ever went to California was on that tour of terror in 2008, and just like it was as awesome as I thought it would be. Like I remember stepping out of our van for the first time, and it was like going from like shitty desert weather to just perfect weather and like palm trees, and it was like exactly how I imagined it, and it kind of always was, like so I feel like one way or another I had to live there for a while, but it feels good to be back here. Like everything's makes more sense to me a little bit on the East Coast. And it's cool to be close to family because we weren't for so long.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Like all my family lives like in the Palm Springs area, which is like 2 hours from me. So like it's like really convenient to get to them if I have to. It's not that far.
Yeah.
Okay, so going all the way back to the early days of TUI, I was always curious how that band came together.
Yeah. So Justice and I were in a couple bands together before that. One was a metalcore band that I started called Carol. My friend Travis sang in it. And back in those days, there was only like really a couple options to choose from band wise. Like Justice didn't even like metalcore and didn't really like, I think we were friends. So he was like in the band, but it's not like he wanted to be in the band really. And then he had a band called Nick Fury, which is like more of a traditional hardcore band. And I didn't really like that either. It was kind of just like faster, kind of like these crew influenced hardcore. And that wasn't really my thing. And their guitar player quit and I joined, and like, that was kind of just how it was for a few years. And let's see, Nick Fury kind of wound down in 2006. But before we did, we were writing a new record with me in the band and kind of had like this idea for what it would sound like. And Justice and I had written songs together for the first time really. And we really liked it. And the band broke up and we kind of just wanted to keep that going, and so the drummer of Nick Fury, Ben, and then me and Justice decided to start a new band. And that's what became TUI. And then originally our friend Anton was actually going to sing in the band. Justice had never sang in a band before. He just played guitar. So like the plan was that Anton was going to sing and then Justice would play guitar. So like we jammed for months, like probably, I want to say like 6 or 7 months we spent writing like what became the demo. And we just like practiced every week and just would like spend hours working on the songs, and I can't remember when we decided Justice would sing, but I'm pretty sure it was like kind of towards the end of that process. So we just played and trying to get Anton to write lyrics and like get ready to record, and I don't think he was. So I want to say that we kind of decided towards the end of that, like last minute, that Justice was going to sing, which was crazy because he had never, like, no one had ever heard him record vocals before or do vocals in the band. So it was kind of just all a huge wild card, honestly. But yeah, I remember we just spent a long time on those songs and kind of getting the vibe down. And then, did the demo in 2007. I want to say it was kind of earlier in the year too. I can't remember. Maybe it was like February or something. And then played our first show. I can't remember like how that fell around the time of the demo timeline, but like it was all very much like last minute. Like I think we decided on our band name because we needed a band name on the flyer for that first show we played. So it was just like a last minute, like, yeah, I guess we'll go with that, you know? And I mean, like the whole thing was very strung together at the beginning.
Yeah, that's so crazy to think about now because obviously you guys have done so much. So to hear that from like, you know, the early days is insane to me, that, you know, Justice wasn't supposed to be on vocals and you just kind of picked your name last minute. And, you know, now every, like, you know, talk to any hardcore kid these days, they know the band name Trapped Under Ice. You still there?
Yeah, sorry, you fell off for a second.
Oh yeah, no, I was saying, if you talk to any hardcore kid these days, like everybody knows the band name Trapped Under Ice.
I know. I think that's funny. Like I said, like we literally had like a list of 3 names, I think, and that was just one of them that we just were like, yeah, we'll go with that. And now, like, I've met people that have Trapped Under Ice tattooed on their face.
On their face? Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 or 3 TUI face tattoo people. It's insane. I remember playing Chain Reaction in LA or Orange County, and one of the people that had it was there, and I like jumped off stage and I saw him. I was like, oh man, like that's awesome. Like, thank you, man. That's so cool. And he was like, yeah, cool, man. Like he like didn't realize that I was in the band. Like, he thought I just like rolled up to him from the crowd.
Oh wow.
So
okay, wow. So
maybe not. But I remember thinking for sure he like didn't realize that I was like giving him that from the perspective of someone in the band. But,
yeah. That's crazy. I've never been a fan of face tattoos. So like I have tattoos, but like I could never picture myself with one because I've never seen a cool one, and I don't think one would look cool on me. So I'm just like, yeah, I'll pass on that.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I have like 3 tattoos. It's not. I like always had this vision of having like something going on, like with some kind of sleeves, and I just look like kind of like a hick with like 3 randomly placed tattoos that like don't really make any sense together. But yeah, it's crazy. Like over the years, I mean, I've seen so many people, especially it seems like in the Midwest, people really like face tattoos. Like we play shows and yeah, I mean, people just completely covered in like their face. It's insane.
Yeah, it's always weird to me because I remember like growing up and wanting tattoos because a lot of my older friends had them. But this was back when it wasn't like normal to have tattoos. Like people still like looked at you like a weirdo or some sort of troublemaker. But now it's just become like so like normal, like in like the society, and like random moms have like full sleeves and it's not even like a big deal anymore. So I was like, yeah, it's so crazy like how far it's come.
Especially in Richmond, man. Richmond's such a weird, like, young city. When you go out to anywhere, like you go to Lowe's or something, half the people you see just have like full sleeves. And they're just like 30 years old. Mm-hmm. And I've never, like, it's nothing like that anywhere I've ever lived, where there's like so many just young alternative people. And maybe they're not alternative. Maybe it's just normal to have tattoos now, but yeah, it's unlike any other city.
That's crazy. Do you ever randomly get spotted by people like when you're out in the city?
Our FedEx, our UPS guy was like, "Oh, what's up, man? You're too." Yeah, like random stuff like that. Yeah, I think there is more like hardcore people here than like in California, such a big state. Yeah, you don't really have that. But yeah, I think there's like just more hardcore people per, like what's that word, per capita? Like there's like just more in the total population here for sure.
Okay. That's awesome. That's funny. Yeah, it's things are like there's so many people in California, so it's not like super common to run into like people from bands.
Yeah, no, I lived in Silver Lake in LA, which is like pretty hipstery.
Okay, yeah.
And I'd run into people all the time there because that was like the block where everybody would go. And I think there's places like that, like where Justice lived for a long time. God, I'm just forgetting the name of it now, but it's like the other place like that that's pretty close by. That Highland Park, sorry, and just like everyone, you'll just see people out all the time.
Yeah. I think that's funny is last time I saw Justice, I've never like actually like had a conversation with him, but I saw him at Coachella Fest because I just saw Turnstile, and I was like leaving from like backstage, and he was like walking to the back, and I was like, oh, and I got excited because I'm like, hell yeah, that's the singer of Trapped Under Ice, and like I didn't know what to say to him, so I just yelled Trapped Under Ice, and he kind of like looked at me, he was like, oh hey, thanks, and I just like left.
Super. That's awesome. Yeah, I like that.
Hell yeah. So I feel like Trapped Under Ice is like a really important band for hardcore, because in 2009, like right before the new decade, you guys dropped Secrets of the World, and that's my favorite TUI record. I like feel like that one just like for the time period, and for what I think is like just like really important for that style of hardcore, and like for like the newer wave of like hardcore bands at the time. I just feel like that one was like really important, and I was just curious if you can talk about what that record means to you.
Yeah. So when we did our first tour with Terror, I'm obviously referencing this tour a lot because it was pretty formative for me and for us as a band.
Okay.
It was like literally 2.5 months long tour, and we had never toured like that before. I think so. TY did a tour with Trash Talk like a few months before that, a US tour, and it wasn't as long. It was like a couple weeks, and I couldn't do it. I was still in school. Our friend Tony B filled in, and this was like the Terror tour was more of like a it was like more of a thought out kind of full tour with more people and just kind of a little bit more, I guess, professional. And we'd never toured with a band like that. Like we were fresh out of playing locally in Baltimore at that point, really. I don't think TY learned a whole lot in the tour of Trash Talk. Like it was just like, like total chaos. And, we didn't have any kind of live, like we do terrible live. So like being on that tour and watching Terror every night, like they had a set list, and they had like good equipment, and they just had it going on. Like they had like just, they were really good. And, it's just like so cool to see them every night. And that started to kind of get the wheels turning for us. Like, oh, like it's not okay to suck. Like we just weren't like, we didn't put any effort into our live set or like our gear. Like I didn't have any, I just plugged in directly to my amp with like a 15-foot cable, and that was it. We'd just like play a song and then stop, and it'd be complete silence and like feedback and stuff. And like, you know what I mean? Just like kind of really, like just not a good flow to our set. And so the drummer of Terror, Nick Jett, on that tour, I remember asking him kind of how they wrote songs, because I was just curious. And they just put out The Damn the Shame, which is an awesome record. And just the songs are super good. And like, we just really liked it. It just come out before that tour. And I was asking him, and he totally surprised me with his answer. He kind of told me how he like took it really seriously, and like would listen to pop music and like kind of study the structure of the songs, and like listen to other types of music, and like really was methodical about it. I guess not methodical, but like it was something that he took seriously. It wasn't just like impulsive writing, And I was like, dang, man, like that's so crazy. Like we don't do anything like that. We just like kind of, because this is before Secrets of the World came out. This is like right after Stay Cold. And that's just, we would just write songs. I don't really know what the criteria was for us back then, but it was what it was, But hearing him say that, and like he would demo out songs on his computer, he like used GarageBand, and that like blew my mind. And he showed me how to use GarageBand on that tour. And so on that tour, I just was like, dude, I got to start like really figuring out this like songwriting stuff. Like I want to get better at it, And we never had like a song that repeated a part more than once, Like every song kind of just like went through a series of riffs and whatever, and it was over. And that was the first time I was like, oh, like songs that aren't hardcore songs like repeat things, and like they like make more sense, and there's like parts that are memorable and all that. And on that tour, I remember after he showed me GarageBand, I like demoed out the song Believe that's on Secrets of the World, like start to finish, exactly how it is now on the record, like just kind of like trying to figure out how but that was the first song that we had like that, where there's like a chorus kind of, and like a part repeated. And I think the reason I'm saying all this is because I think that was an important transition for us, going from the style we had and kind of just the way the songs were to, I think what made us stand out ultimately was that we had that style that was kind of heavier and harder and whatever, but there was still something there that people could take away from it and remember. And like, it was, I guess people say catchy, people would say TUI is kind of catchy. And I think we thought about that then, like, oh, like that's a catchy riff or whatever. Like we kind of started thinking more about that than I think before, like how can we make stuff more memorable, and, and not for the sake of making it memorable, but just like making it better, like why have 1,000 different, like the song Stay Cold, like I always joke about this with Justice, has every single fret on the guitar from like 0 to 12 is used in the song. Like it's just like there's every single note is used. Whereas like, some of our later songs, like there'd only be like 3 or 4. Like we'd kind of like strip it down to what we thought was the best piece of it, and just kind of like thinking like that was new. And I think that really was inspired by Touring with Terror back then. So after that tour, I can't remember the timeline between then and when we recorded, but it was a time where I just graduated from school, and I didn't have a job yet, and I just kind of would write nonstop, and Justice would come over and we'd write in my room, and yeah, we just like threw ourselves into that record. And I think that's kind of and there's also me and Justice also like kind of listening to new music too. Like when we started TUI, I didn't have a great grasp on what the genre was that we were participating in. Like I knew of hardcore more as like a tangent to metalcore, like my band was metalcore in high school, and there's select hardcore bands I like Hatebreed, and I had just been exposed to them like when we started TUI basically. And then like I knew some Madball songs, so I knew of Biohazard, and I liked all those bands, but I just didn't like hardcore really at that point, because what was popular then was kind of like melodic bands.
Yeah.
And like faster hardcore, which I still just don't really like. It just wasn't for me. And so I think as we kind of progressed as a band, I like listened to more stuff. Like I discovered more bands that I really liked, like Marauder or something like that. Like which I like hadn't heard before we started the band. And like just being introduced to more stuff, I think helped shape it as well. But yeah, so the timelines to me are pretty hazy, but I think something like a year or so after we did that tour, I think we did a lot of writing and ended up in the studio the next winter.
I'm tripping out hearing your process, because so like, me from outsider looking in, I just like look at you, oh, Sam Trapkin, guitar player of Trapped in Rise, they write cool songs, so I just assumed you're like, super talented from the beginning. Like I always just imagine you just being like super structured and had everything together from the start. So I'm hearing you break it down and how you talked to Nick Jett on that tour, and just kind of gaining some knowledge and actually coming up with a process to actually sit down and take it more serious. Like it's like crazy, but like awesome to hear, because like seriously, like I like that record to the world. I think is like really important, like for me, and just like for hardcore in general.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, that's funny you think that, because I mean, I can't emphasize enough how little we knew what we were doing. Mm-hmm. I'm not joking when I say I really didn't know what hardcore was when we like wrote our demo. Like it was literally, I went to metalcore shows and was in this hardcore band with Justice and our friend Kenny and a few other people, and like it was kind of just like a fun thing. Mm-hmm. And I would just like play solos over their hardcore songs, and it was kind of like a joke almost that we did it. Like it was just fun,
Yeah.
But it wasn't like we sat around listening to like Madball and like AF and all these things. We're like, yeah, let's start a hardcore band that sounds like this or that. Like there was none of that. Like Justice's, one of his big influences was Crown of Thorns when we started. Mm-hmm. But like I hadn't heard Crown of Thorns at all. Like I don't think I heard them until like way later, as of us being a band. So yeah, it totally was like, I even think that some of the stuff we wrote in the demo, I wrote like, I don't know if you ever heard, we had like this joke band with our friend Anton, and I like wrote some of the riffs for that. Like I think some of the riffs from the song Reality Unfold I actually wrote for that like years before TUI, like when I was 19 or something, and I just had no idea. Like, I guess I'm trying to say that we just didn't really know what we were doing at all. And yeah, it's funny that it worked out how it did.
Yeah, and I feel like that was like you kind of like put like way more people into this. I feel like you guys like started going on like bigger tours with that first record.
Yeah, I think I mean the Terror thing was crazy because it's hard to remember the fact that like now like we've done tours and everyone's older and like knows people in other bands and other states and stuff. But I mean back then we had only ever been in Baltimore really, and like the furthest we had played was Virginia. So like it's not like we had some big network of friends. So like we were really just random people from Baltimore at that point, and we didn't know people in Richmond. It wasn't like now where I feel like hardcore kids kind of like mingle more on like Instagram and stuff like that, and like have friends around the country. Like I guess it was just different back then. But I only knew people in Baltimore, and the Terror thing I remember was like I think someone in the band, I think it was their bass player at the time, Busky, posted something about us, and I thought that was insane. Like Terror was like the biggest band ever to me at that point, and I loved them as a band, and I had like listened to them since I was a teenager, and that was kind of I think what segued into that, where he just like found it, and next thing we kind of got like asked to be on that tour with them. So yeah, that was like a huge jump for us because we'd only done tours with. I think by the time we got asked to do that, we had only done like an East Coast tour with like Steel Nation and Con of Arabia, which was even crazy for us at the time to do a tour like that. So yeah, we didn't have a lot going on before.
And I was always curious, how'd you guys end up on Reaper Records?
I can't remember how Kitzel, who runs Reaper Records, found us. He reached out like really early on, I think after our demo, and then he came to see us one of the first times he played upstate New York. I forget where exactly it was. And he came and he met us at the show, and I think he was interested in maybe putting out our next record. And he was just like blown away at how bad we were. He like watched us play live, and he's just like, yeah, like you guys are like, your record's cool, man, but you guys just like really have to get it together live. Like it was just a joke pretty much. And he was super supportive back then. And I think he like saw potential that we didn't see. And yeah, I mean, we were talking to him super early, like, right after the demo came out, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And when he told you that, like, what you guys, have to get it together, like, how did that make you feel back then, if you can remember?
Yeah, I had a couple of those moments through the years. I think you're just like, I don't know. I was never the type of person that like prepared for stuff like shows or whatever. Like we kind of just, our style at that point was we would just roll up like at our set time basically and like borrow gear, and it was kind of just like a shit show. Like where some bands show up and they have like all this nice gear and they're like at the venue 3 hours early. That wasn't our style at all. Like it was just kind of a hot mess. And then I remember like Nick from Terror also on that first tour did kind of scolded me like halfway through. Like we showed up at a show in oh man, somewhere in the Midwest, I forget where, and he was like, dude, you guys can't keep doing this. Like it was like a real tour, It's like, you guys can't just show up at like doors every night. It's a joke. Like you guys have to get it together. And he's like, like there has to be someone in the band that's like keeping track of like when you guys are leaving and like what time you're waking up. And that was just like, yeah, we had a couple moments like that where we kind of like realized we had to get it together.
Yeah, that's wild. I can't imagine. Yeah, like like you guys are all like younger, and this like all this like touring and stuff is like so new to you, and you're kind of like, all right, like you guys are like kind of like learning as you go, which is like pretty crazy to hear.
Yeah, man, totally. I mean, it's kind of hard to understand now, I guess, but it's like just the background we were coming from in Baltimore. Like Baltimore is such a unique place, and like our group of friends, like no one took anything too seriously. Like even the band, like everything we did was kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, but everything was kind of a joke almost. Like, and I think that kind of came across in what we did. Like everything that we did as a band, like the cover of our demo, it's like kind of a joke, you know, like everything is kind of done half serious, half joking. And yeah, I don't think anyone from Baltimore had it together like that. Like no one was like coming from a background where you like showed up at the show like 3 hours before doors and like, you know, had all your gear prepped. Like, I don't know, like it just kind of, we were coming from a pretty disorganized background.
Okay. And you guys came out with a split back in the day with Dirty Money. Can you talk about how you guys linked up with that band?
That's a good question. I actually don't really remember. I think I'm trying to think. I want to say that Justice had talked to them online or something like that. This is like probably MySpace era. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I honestly can't remember how that came together. That kind of just like materialized, and I think Justice was more involved in kind of putting that together. I mean, we ended up touring with them a few times after that, but in terms of the initial idea, I'm not sure how it came together.
Yeah, I'm thinking about MySpace since you mentioned it, and then I don't think there's ever been like another situation where like somebody just, or well, not somebody, where like the whole community just kind of left the platform and went somewhere else. Because you think about, you know, everybody left MySpace, went to like Facebook, but now we have Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and all that, and like, you know, everybody, not everybody, but like I feel like the communities are all spread out. People have multiple social media apps, and it's not just like the one like MySpace was back in the day. And it's just crazy to think about how that all just kind of fell apart, because like it was super popular. Everybody had a MySpace. It was just like a weird time to think about.
It was awesome for bands too. Like, I mean, that was the place that you would release stuff, or like where people would hear your band. I remember like back when we were, cause I think it was still the main thing when we put out Stay Cold. And I think that our songs had like hundreds of thousands of plays on MySpace, which is insane to think about now, like looking back at where we were as a band. Uh-huh. Like it was pretty significant for the time. I do miss that, you know, like having the band pages, especially. That was awesome. That nothing's really fully substituted that, in my opinion.
Yeah, because like I feel like everybody was like locked in on MySpace, and I spent a lot of time jumping from like, you know, like one band and then looking at their top 8 and going like, you know, from top 8 to top 8, just trying to figure out and find new music.
Yeah.
Because like
yeah,
it's strange because I have like Spotify is like my like music streaming service, and I like look at the similar artists, or I'll like check out the daily mixes that they curate for me, and sometimes it hits, which is like rare, but then most of the time I'm just kind of like, why do they put these bands on this mix? This is so weird.
Yeah, no, I do that too. Like I'll go through related artists, and sometimes I'll check who the related artists are for bands that I've been in, and kind of just like see what it is. And sometimes there's like weird stuff on there, but yeah, I mean that's definitely how I do it now. And I for sure just throw on daily mixes all the time. Like it pretty much just covers the main genres I listen to, which is like punk, like, you know, stuff like Beatles, and then like death metal, basically. Like those are my 3 different genres that they provide me. So I'll usually just like pick one of those.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So after Secrets of the World, you guys did like way more shows and tours and stuff, but then you guys put out your next record, Big Kiss Goodnight, which I feel like, okay, TUI was like big from Secrets of the World, but I feel like with Big Kiss Goodnight, you guys just kind of took it to like a whole nother level. Like, yeah, I feel like the majority of hardcore was like paying attention, but then you guys just kind of took over the whole scene with this next record, and I feel like everybody was paying attention, and you guys kind of like blew up. I felt like that's like the record, like when you mentioned TUI, that's like most of the time that's the record that people kind of bring up is Big Kiss Goodnight. Yeah. Did you have like any expectations on what that record would become?
No, and I think that it's also like one thing to think about it now, but another to have been there in the moment when the record came out and all that stuff. And when it was actually happening, it wasn't really that crazy. Like it felt like a pretty natural progression at the time.
Uh-huh.
You know, like we did a pretty long US tour where we headlined after that record came out, and those shows weren't that crazy, you know, like they're pretty normal shows for us. It was like, you know, it was an awesome tour. It was I think our first like big, like full headline tour like that. But I think it was similar to Secrets from the World in that we just wanted to write the best songs that we possibly could, and we spent a lot of time on it. And I think we'd all kind of like done more, you know, since Secrets of the World. So like at that point, I'd done 2 Diamond records, so I kind of had some different perspective writing and like doing other genres and recording. So that was definitely an influencing factor. And yeah, I think the intention was the same. We just wanted to make the best possible songs, and I think we just had more ideas about how to do that with Big Kiss Goodnight. You know, like we just tried different stuff. Like I remember there's a song on there called True Love where we had the idea that we'd like write a song based around vocals instead of like the backing track, like the music first. So I remember like Justice would show me the lyrics for that, and like I wrote a riff around it, like that type of thing, like stuff that we weren't thinking about before. And like, oh, like this part could be vocally focused, and this part could be like, you know, just this, like kind of just thinking about more than just, you know, 2 guitars and drums and bass and vocals at all times. Yes, I think we kind of like had a little bit of new experience musically at that point. And yeah, I mean, expectation wise, I had no idea. Even leaving the studio from Big Kiss Goodnight, I remember driving back to, we did that in Orange County, and I remember driving back to LA after, and we like listening to the rough mixes in the car, and I was just like, I don't know if this is good. Like I was like, especially because rough mixes are just so overwhelming to listen to because like stuff is way too loud or it's like distracting. But yeah, we didn't really know how people would react doing that, you know, and the songs that became the ones that were the most well received and popular, like weren't the ones that I expected. Like it's just stuff like that where we didn't really know.
Yeah, I was curious. You guys use like a lot of samples in that record, and I just curious, like, what made you guys want to use that stuff from those movies?
Yeah, it's a lot of John Waters stuff. I think that was really Justice's thing. He really likes John Waters. That's obviously a big Baltimore thing, and that movie's awesome. And I'm not sure like I don't know that there was like a super intentional theme around that, like, oh, we should have a bunch of samples from this movie, but I think just the content of the lyrics with like the samples kind of synced up well, and ended up working. I want to say we even like edited down some of the samples on the record, but it ended up working nicely with the song, so we went for it. But it wasn't like a big premeditated thing.
Okay. Well, I always appreciate when bands like use cool samples, like especially things that like I'm familiar with, because I'm not the best when it comes to like movie references. Like I'll be hanging out with my friends and they're quoting movies and it goes over my head, and I'm just like, oh, like I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. But like when I listen to like, you know, something like Big Kids Good Night, and I'm like, oh, like I know exactly where that's from. That's awesome. Like it kind of gets me like a little more excited.
That's cool. Yeah. I'm the same way. I don't know any movies or like references really, so. Yeah, I think that was all Justice.
Yeah, and one of my favorite shows from 2011, I'll never forget. It was Sound and Fury, which you guys have played since like the early days, which is awesome, which I want to touch on later. But 2011, you guys played Sound and Fury. I'll never forget. I was like up front and just enjoying my time, and I was just like, this set is amazing. And I was like, I'm not even gonna mosh, I'm just gonna sit here and just enjoy the set. And then I'm pretty sure you guys were playing like Gemini, and I was like I can't just stand here, this is gonna be criminal if I don't like, you know, do more. So I remember just like, you know, just going off and just loving that set just in particular. So like that's just something that I'll always like remember from you guys, the Sound and Fury 2011 set.
Yeah, that was really fun. I think I want to say that was right after we recorded Big Kiss Goodnight. And I remember one of the things that stood out to me was, so Chad Gilbert that produced that record, I remember him being in the pit for we like played a new song off Big Kiss Goodnight, the song Jail. And like I don't think we'd played it live before. And I remember thinking that was awesome. But yeah, that show, I mean, dude, all the Sound and Furies we played have been so cool. Even the one we did a few years ago. Like I think we did 2008, 2011, and I think that would have been 2018 we did it. Mm-hmm. They've all been super fun. I mean, 2008 was probably one of the most formative shows and like moments for me as a person.
So back then, did you even know what Sound and Fury was? Because like I feel like those early days of Sound and Fury, like those like that vibe is like a little different from what came like after that.
Right. Yeah. I guess I'd heard of it. I guess it was newer then. Like I think the first year was probably like 2006 or 7.
2006. Yeah.
Yeah, and like up until that point, I think the big fests were like Posy Numbers and Hellfest, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of my reference points. And I don't think that the significance of Sound and Fury, at least for me in Baltimore, like really was apparent back then. So I had no idea what it was like. I mean, part of the reason I said it was formative was just because that was our first. We did play with Trash Talk in California.
Yeah.
Again, I wasn't there, but I don't think it was anything crazy. It was like pretty small DIY shows, but that to me was really our first like real show in California was Sound and Fury. And I mean, playing a show like that where there's like literally 1,000 people, you know, at that particular venue is like pretty big, kind of like a dome structure with a lot of room and just like that many people watching us and, you know, like just the amount of people singing and pitting and stuff, it was just like totally unreal, especially because we were halfway through a US tour where we were pretty much playing when doors opened and like no one really watched us.
Yeah, kids just standing around.
Yeah, it's not like we were super hyped up, like, oh, we're killing it. It was like, man, it's awesome to be on tour with Terror and that we get to like play on a tour, even though we're pretty much playing at doors and, you know, we'd have like 10 people kind of like maybe involved in our set. But I mean, dude, Sound and Fury 2008 was like a total turning point for us. And I mean, for me, because I had never played a show like that or like knew that even existed.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned earlier you had the conversation with Nick Jett about, you know, songwriting process and, you know, in the coming years, you guys, you know, would play bigger fests, go overseas. Did you kind of just like learn to be more professional as a band with, you know, each new show you guys were playing, or did you guys kind of have like a sit down and talk about like, hey, like we're doing more stuff, like let's be more professional?
Yeah, I mean, the talk that Nick Jett had with me really did change things. He was kind of like, I think, the person in Terror that was on top of their schedule and like making sure they showed up on time and all that stuff. And I kind of became that person for TUI. And I mean, Justice was handling a lot of other stuff at the time, like, you know, like more general booking and that sort of thing. And he was in contact with people about the band. But for touring, I kind of became the de facto tour manager a little bit. And I think with like our live sets, we definitely talked about, I think just we were influenced being on that tour, just seeing how other people do it. And that was more of a natural thing. I don't think we like sat down and talked about it, but just every tour, I think we got a little bit better and started to piece together more of a set list and got tighter live over time too. I kind of just figured out how to move around on stage more. Like, I think that's something you really have to get used to. You know, like the first year or two of us being a band is kind of standing around awkwardly and you don't really like know what to do yet. And just like spending a lot of time on stage and practicing doing that, you kind of like get more used to it and just like know how to sound good live, I guess, and like do things that translate better live. So I think that was just purely by doing it so much that we kind of slowly got better. I don't think we were ever the greatest live band, especially like, I mean, if you took a live recording of our set, it'd probably be, you know, not that great, but I think we like ultimately were able to be a fun band to watch at least, and like had energy at the very least. So I think that just took time for us.
So you guys put out Big Kiss Goodnight, and then that was in 2011. Fast forward to 2013, you guys play This Is Hardcore, and then that was kind of it. You guys went on this hiatus, and I never really knew why. I still don't know why, and I was curious, like, why'd you guys like make that announcement, and why'd you guys go on the hiatus?
Yeah, I think the big reason was we kind of saw at that time that we really had two options, and things have changed a lot since then.
Mm-hmm.
But back then I think it was much more normal and expected that hardcore bands kind of did this like career touring thing where you were either that or you weren't, you know? And I think we were feeling the pressure of like becoming one of those bands where like everyone wanted us on tours, and we had we had, you know, booking agents at different points and record labels at different points, and people wanted us to do stuff. People wanted, you know, us different places. And I think we kind of just didn't feel like that was what we wanted to do. You know, like it started to feel too weird and just kind of like not the direction we wanted to head in. And it's changed since then, I think. You know, like if you look at how bands tour now, like you don't see the 2.5 month long US tour anymore. But back then that was still kind of the standard. Bands like Turnstile will play like an East Coast tour and a West Coast tour a couple times a year, and like that's it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like that just wasn't like that back then. And so I think we kind of just had this false choice of like either we're a full-time band or we're not. And I think we were just getting kind of burnt out on touring at the time, and just I think, you know, like I was starting to do Diamond stuff, like Justice was starting in Angel Dust, and Brian was doing Turnstile, and it wasn't like there wasn't any like tension or anything in the band. We just kind of like hey, it's getting kind of weird and not as fun as it used to be. Like let's take a break instead of like breaking up. There's no reason to break up. You know, we just wanted to like basically tell people that we weren't available for a couple of years, because it, you know, I feel like we just had to make that definitive. But yeah, like there's no reason to break up. I don't think there ever would be. So that was really the only reason why. There wasn't some big dramatic like secret or reason. It just kind of seemed to make the most sense at the time.
Yeah, I definitely felt you guys at that time had to, you know, I felt like you guys were like the biggest band in hardcore at the time. And I felt like, okay, you guys are starting to draw like attention outside of like the genre. And I was like, okay, they could be the next, you know, Hatebreed, Terror, Knock Loose, like, you know, like a band that kind of like transcends and starts doing like, you know, different tours and does put out, you know, consistently like new music and consistent tours. I felt that like that's the direction you guys were headed. And then when you guys announced the hiatus, I was like, damn, like that's definitely like crazy, because you know, like the biggest band in hardcore, like, all right, like we're gonna, you know, go away for a bit. And I was like, this is insane, because I felt like, you know, you guys were at like the top of it and like ready to go into like the next, like, you know, level or wherever that is.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's also hard too to like tour a lot and like have a life outside of touring. You kind of have to do one or the other at a certain point. Like no one wants to employ you when you're on tour 6 months a year. Like it's kind of hard to find that setup.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was kind of part of the choice then too, is kind of just like, if we are going to just be like a touring band and then we just do TUI full time, like it's kind of shutting down everything else in our lives, whether that be like working or like doing other bands or like having other things in our lives that we're into. And we just weren't feeling that, you know, it just like wasn't the right fit for us. So yeah, I think that's all it was. And we got to do so much cool stuff. It wasn't like we felt like we were leaving a bunch of things on the table. I mean, we had toured with all of our favorite bands and put out records we were stoked on. And I don't know, it wasn't to us like the end of something or anything dramatic. Like I said, it's kind of just like what felt right then. And we're all still, I mean, everyone in the band's my best friend still. And like, we still want to do more music, you know. I think we just kind of have always gravitated towards what felt right and what, you know, what made sense for all of us. So it wasn't really anything beyond that. Yeah.
And I always think about these bands that do get bigger, and like I feel like there's this weird like stigma that comes with it. It's like, oh, like they tour too much, or every record sounds the same. But it's just like, man, like you can never please anybody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So,
Well, that is a thing though. It's like
yeah.
you do get into that cycle where it's like, if you want to tour that much, you have to keep putting out records. And like, what if you aren't ready to put out a record? Like, what if you don't really feel inspired to write a new record? Like, then what, So I think that was another thing too, is kind of felt like we were all happy with Big Kiss Goodnight and didn't have like the record behind it that we were ready to put out, and that was fine.
So you guys go on a hiatus, and there was like a 2-year gap. And for me, there was the announcement you guys are doing like a 3-show run in California, which that was awesome. I was like, hell yeah! Like this band from Baltimore, they're coming back and they're doing 3 shows in California. I was like, I love living here. People love coming here, so it's a good thing. And I'll never forget. L.A. You guys covered Bad Seed, which I thought was awesome. And I was curious, whose idea was that, and like where did that come from?
I think that was Justice's idea, but that was something that we had tinkered with for years. I think like we had talked about wanting to cover that for a long time, because we all, I heard you talk to Shane about this. Like, Justice has a Bad Seed tattoo. I love Bad Seed when they were, active as a band, and I saw them several times in Baltimore when they were touring. Like, they weren't really. Shane mentioned this, like how when they were actually a band, it's not like they were huge or anything. Like, I saw them play at an art space in Baltimore with like 20 people there.
Yeah.
But it was awesome. And anyways, I love that EP they put out. And that song Worldview is just like one of the heaviest songs ever, in my opinion, like hardcore songs.
Yeah.
I don't know, something about it. And it's just something like, it just felt like someone needed to play that song again, just because it's so sweet and like such a fun. Dude, like I've been at so many fun shows with them, and that song in particular just like would have the craziest response live. So it was awesome playing it.
Yeah. So you guys played it in LA, but the next night in Orange County, you guys didn't cover it, and I was like pretty bummed. I was like, damn, I was looking forward to hearing it again.
Yeah, I forget why. I think that's just like, we try to switch it up if we play somewhere close to like where we were the day before. We probably just like subbed it out with something else. But yeah.
Yeah, and I always like look back at that show that you guys played in Orange County. It was like you guys, God's Hate, Lifeless, and I forget who else was on the bill. But it was one of those like weird shows where it was safer to be in the pit than outside the pit, because I just was remembering like, so many people just getting punched like left and right, and fights almost like breaking out. But I was like, yeah, it was crazy. I was like, yeah, it's safer to be moshing than just standing there watching the band, or just like trying to not get hit. It was insane. It was like a wild night. I'll never forget that show for you guys. Was like come back from like the hiatus.
Yeah, all those shows were awesome in California. And yeah, sometimes you gotta pit to survive.
So yeah, and the 2-year gap, and you guys came back. You guys just like, were you like ready to just kind of hit the road again? You guys just felt refreshed. It was nice to take that break from TUI, because you guys came back and like were pretty active that year.
Yeah, I think we were mostly active because, well, we did like shows, kind of just like some West Coast shows, some East Coast shows, and then some Europe stuff, just as kind of like our first batch coming back. But then I don't think we did a whole lot until we put out Heat Wave, which we wanted to like actually do a little bit of touring around. So I think that was probably the bulk of our touring that we did post hiatus, I guess. But yeah, I don't think that like none of us wanted to come back and do full US tours again, really. I think we just wanted to like do little stuff here and there and have it be fun. Like we don't have, like a manager or a booking agent. Like Justice books our shows, so there's not like pressure. Our Heat Wave we put out on Justice and Brendan and our friend Dan's label, Pop Wig. Like there's literally no external influence on what we're doing at all. So there wasn't like pressure, like, oh, you guys got to get out there and do this or that. We kind of just did what we wanted with the band at that point.
And you guys put out Heat Wave, and there's a pretty big gap in between Big Kiss Goodnight and Heat Wave. And how do you feel the newest record was perceived?
Dude, received pretty well. I mean, considering we really didn't do a whole lot promoting it, and it was put out on not like a huge label, Justin and Brennan's label that they do themselves. Like there's a lot of bands now like on Roadrunner, like Turnstile, and like, I mean, that really reaches out to people, and like, they have a much more like robust promotion engine than, something label like Popwig. And it just felt like something very DIY for us, which is what we wanted. So I was stoked on the response. Like I think the best you can hope for with any record you put out is a couple songs at least become like staples in a live set, and I think we accomplished that. Like, a couple songs off that record really like kind of stuck around, and I think will kind of be like permanent in our set for whatever shows we play in the future. So, I mean, that record was super fun, like just writing it and recording it with our friend Arthur. Just like a really kind of, just the kind of like good memories looking back on that all the way through. Like, it was just a fun record to do, and can't say the same for every record we've done. Like the first couple we did, like Stay Cold and Secrets of the World, kind of like a dark memory. Like we were just like recording in the middle of winter in Queens, and just like, didn't have a whole lot going on, just like kind of broke, and versus like Heat Wave or Big Kiss Goodnight are a lot more fun.
So it's been 3 years since Heat Wave came out. Are you guys working on any new music, or are you guys just kind of laying low? Because I know you guys had some plans. You guys were supposed to go to Australia, Outbreak Fest. I think that's still in the air. I'm not sure if that's been canceled yet.
That's canceled.
Oh, okay. I got canceled. Okay. But is there any new music in the works?
Yeah. I mean, nothing like crazy, but yeah, like we've been very casually writing. Nothing like, we haven't gotten together and jammed or anything, but I'm always, thinking a little stuff, and so is Justice. So yeah, I think maybe when we get to hang out in person again or whatever, I think we'll start getting more ideas together, especially since I'm on the East Coast now and can see Brendan. But yeah, I mean, we don't have like some master plan right now to record something by a certain time, but I think we will do more.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, that's definitely awesome to hear, because like from the beginning of the year till now, there were some fests that were announced, and I was always curious because I didn't see your guys' name on any of the big fests that had been announced before they all got canceled. So I was always wondering, I wonder if they're going to pop up at some point during the year and do something big in the States, or are they just going to kind of take the year off?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it all depends on the coronavirus stuff. I mean, it'd be great to play some shows this year. We were stoked to do Australia and Outbreak Fest. So if hardcore shows are happening and the timing works out, then yeah, we will. But it's not like we're trying to make that happen. It's really just for fun.
Yeah. It's just like, if it happens, cool. If not, it's just like, all right, let's just keep on moving and hopefully get to next year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're not like in a rush to do anything.
So what are you doing these days now? Like, do you have any other bands that you're playing in besides TUI?
Not actively. I've had this idea to do a death metal band for like the last year or two, and wrote a couple songs, and I've kind of been working on that for a while. And Brendan, that's in TUI and Turnstile, is gonna play drums. That's the plan right now, and we have a very loose plan to record that in his bedroom studio. But that's about it. Like, besides like the TUI stuff that we're like slowly working on, nothing else going on.
Okay, and congratulations. You're a newer dad. How's the dad life treating you?
It's awesome, man. I'm just glad we made it here before the quarantine stuff happened, because it's very nice to be here right now. Just like basically just chilling in our neighborhood and have some friends here, and it's awesome. I mean, it's like totally, it's something that you have no idea what it's like until you do it, and it's been a pretty big, I'd say, growing experience for me and my wife, and definitely learned a lot and our life has changed a lot, but you know, it's obviously all worth it. It's just so crazy, like um, to see how fast they change, you know, and like our son's gone from, you know, like can't even like move off his back to now he's like basically sprinting, not on his feet, but like crawling, like, you know, across the house at an insane speed, like, you know, in a matter of a few months, you know, like just stuff like changes so fast. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And just, man, like having friends nearby with kids on the same age, it's just fun. It's fun to see people kind of become parents and, yeah, dude, it's like a whole new chapter and a whole new experience. I'm glad that I've done things like toured because I feel like it prepared me for, you know, kind of a less than ideal reality of like being a parent of an infant, like sleeping weird hours and like in weird places and that sort of thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've been broken down in the past from just touring, and you know, I'm able to adapt well to those situations. So yeah, it's been awesome.
Oh yeah, that's cool to hear that, you know, tours, you know, in some weird way prepared you to, you know, handle these tasks as being a new father.
Yeah, I think touring changes you a lot. You know, like I guess it could be for better or for worse, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like you, it's kind of like, I would imagine similar to the effect of when you go into like the military and they like shave your head and they like put you through boot camp and you kind of like lose your identity almost and get built back up or whatever. Like, I think it's almost like that where you just get totally broken down and kind of just like submit yourself to it. And like, yeah, I all the things that I had as little quirks, you know, like, oh, I can't sleep unless it's this way or that way, or like if people are snoring or talking, like all that goes away, you know, you just get used to all those things and sleep in insane circumstances and learn to thrive.
Did you find it hard to readjust when you would come home from tour?
Yes, I did. I remember I worked at Under Armour in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I sat at a desk, you know, and I remember doing like, we do like a 2-month Europe tour. We'd like be on a bus or something. Like, it'd be like insane tour, like so much fun, just like the best time of your life. And you're like on the move every day, going to a new city and all this stuff. And then you come home the next day, you just go straight and sit in a desk, and it's just like the bright white lights above you, and like everything's moving so slow, and like everything just seems so boring and like meaningless when you come back, you know?
Yeah.
Because back then that was like, that's like all I cared about, you know, like that was it, was doing the band, you know, and like the only place that you wanted to be was really touring. Like you just wanted to play shows and like be with your friends. And yeah, coming back was always super weird. Like it took time to adjust.
Did your coworkers know what you did outside of work?
Yeah, can't remember how like that kind of came to be, but it's like, you know, Under Armour is a very not like alternative people work there, you know, so like yeah, they'd call me stuff like Sam the Rock Star and shit like that, you know, like, and come by and like pat me on the back and be like, Sammy here's in a band. And, you know, they're like, oh, cool, man. What do you do? Like play bars? I'm like, yeah, totally. And they're like, cool. Like whereabouts? I'm like, oh yeah, like we play the Maryland circuit, you know, played a little bit of Virginia, and like, oh man, hell yeah. Like just like that kind of vibe.
It's so, yeah. Cause
I remember one time.
Go ahead.
I remember one time my manager put, we had like a speaker system that like went throughout the entire floor
Mm-hmm.
of our building, and he thought it'd be funny to put on a TY song and like put on the song Evelyn off our demo, which just like isn't a good recording. And at this point, like everyone knew I was in the band and like toured a lot and stuff. And it's just like he put it on, everyone's like, oh, like what is this? And he's like, this is Sam's band, and just like it was just like horrifying. So yeah, it was weird. It never like, it's not like living in LA and you're in a band and everyone's like, cool, like what's your band sound like? It's just like totally the opposite of what people understand and are used to. So yeah, it was always kind of weird going back and people asking about it.
That's crazy. Yeah, I always find it troubling when people ask like what hardcore is, and I'm just kind of like, I'm just like, I can't really explain it. So like, I was just asked them if they know what Hatebreed is, and if they say yeah, I'm like, cool, that's hardcore. And bye. I was just like, want to get out of this conversation so fast because it's just like, obviously, like I've been a part of it for a long time, but it's just something you kind of just have to know. I can't just like go and explain to you like what like the whole like culture means in just a couple sentences.
Right. But. I know, yeah. And people seem to know like about the word hardcore. Like if you say that you're in a hardcore band, like, oh yeah, like yelling, you're like, yeah, exactly. But you're right. I mean, what makes it special obviously is like the kind of cultural aspect of it. And that's just something that is really hard to describe. And I mean, it just doesn't make sense to people, especially like if you're talking to like a 50-year-old coworker, like you can't explain it.
Yeah, because it just doesn't. They just don't get it. They just think it's like some weird form of rock.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. Do you ever trip out? You starting this band, Trapkin Rise, and then you guys kind of get as big as you are now.
Yeah, I think. I guess what trips me out is like the group of friends that I was in the band with, like Brendan, Justice. Like people that I've known Justin since I was 15, and Brendan since he was 15, and I think I was like 19, something like that. And it's just crazy because like I can't emphasize enough how much like Baltimore wasn't really a cool city necessarily, like on everyone's radar back then. It's not like we were people that everybody knew. Baltimore's like a weird place, it had a very unique hardcore scene and culture, and it is trippy to me that, like we did as much as we did, like Turner Style has done as much as they have. And like, it's just the kind of same weird group of people from Baltimore. It's not like LA where you go to shows and there's like a famous person there and it's cool. And like everyone thinks hardcore is cool. Like hardcore for us growing up in Baltimore was like, much different than that. And there was, like 15 people in a bar that's like underground, and just like 300-pound men like swinging around violently, and just like it's the vibe is just so different, and like the culture there is so different. So for our bands to do what they did and to kind of come from that background where I don't think any of us ever, I didn't expect Trapkin Rise to ever play outside of like Maryland or Virginia, so it is weird to think about that, because yeah, like I mean it's just a really kind of like Baltimore is just a super unique place, and there's not really much precedent for it either. It's not like there's a bunch of big bands coming out of Baltimore or anything like that. It's not like, like LA or New York or something. So there are great bands from Baltimore, like Stout, Next Step Up, but it's not like bands that were touring a lot, especially in our generation. So yeah, it's funny, man.
Yeah, but I feel like you guys kind of showed like probably the younger kids that it is possible from your area, because if you look at Baltimore now, there's awesome bands that are from there, like and I'm talking about like the younger bands like End It, Adrenaline, Queensway.
Yeah,
so it's something cool to see, like because I feel like you guys probably had like a like some sort of impact on those kids.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be awesome. I hope so. Like, it wasn't, it was weird. Like, I feel like our generation, like people my age and like Justice's age, like I feel like that was kind of a wave of people that went through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those people like kind of went all the way through and like ultimately kind of moved away and stuff. And there definitely is, it's been about 10 years or more since that. And I feel like there is like kind of a younger generation of people, and dude, it's awesome. I mean, I remember going to shows for the first time and seeing the dudes at the shows there that were like our age and thinking they were old and cool, and like kind of like these mythological characters back then, like you go to the show and you'd want to see like Ed Lock and Butt Crack and like Jersey Mike. Like there's like all these people that you thought were just so cool and, kind of like inspired you. And it's cool that there is that kind of newer wave of people now that we didn't have any crossover with, that are still doing new bands there. It's awesome.
Oh yeah. Well, Sam, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on the podcast. I know you mentioned you don't do these things that often, so I was just happy that you're willing to come on here and talk to me. Like, I definitely appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, man.
And before we sign off, is there anything you want to shout out or plug?
Just thanks for having me on, man. Like I said, super fun, and your podcast is awesome. I kind of checked out the people you're having on, and it's cool what you're doing, man. Like I saw you had Ethan from Still Nation on.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you're like bringing light to bands that like not everybody these days might know about, and I think that's really cool. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, seriously, thank you again. Thank you guys for listening. This has been another episode of the Jamie K podcast. Always on top.